What's your scariest Tinder story? Story 1. Well, I have only gone on one Tinder date. We talked for a bit and I agreed to pick her up at Starbucks. She looked nothing like her pictures, but I thought I should be nice and at least hang out with her for a bit. We went to her place and the entire house reeked like cat urine, completely saturated. Then as she proceeded to show me her massive collection of animal tail butt plugs, she screamed at her chihuahua and smacked it right on the nose and, without missing a beat, simply asked if I wanted to make out on the couch. I awkwardly sat down and pretended to look at my phone and made up that my grandmother was dying so I could get out of there. Story 2. My worst Tinder experience was pretty traumatizing for me at the time. I was a sophomore in college and she was a junior or senior at the same school. The first time we ever hung out, I went over to her apartment and we just watched some Netflix and hung out. Nothing crazy. I was thinking this girl is super cool and we may have something here. So I left telling her I would like to see her again if she was interested. She told me she would love to and to just message her whenever, and we would make some plans. We started texting and sending pictures throughout the week and organized plans for the following weekend. Out of nowhere, she started sending me unsolicited nude photos. I never once asked for them, and when we were hanging out the weekend prior, there was no sexual activity at any level. We quite literally watched Netflix and relaxed. It caught me off guard, but I was more than okay with it. I was a young college guy, and this attractive older girl wanted to send me nude photos after only hanging out one time, so I was not complaining. Fast forward to the weekend, she came to my apartment and we were hanging out with my roommates watching something on television. She asked me if she could stay the night, and after sending nude photos to me all week, I kind of figured what was going on, but I told her, of course, and to be polite, I offered to sleep on the couch because we had only known each other for about 2 weeks and had only seen each other in person one time before. She told me she would rather me sleep in my bed with her, so I knew what that meant. We started watching Netflix in my room and I made a move. We started hooking up and eventually ended up having S. I wore a condom, finished inside of it, and tossed it to the side of my bed. As we were lying there a few minutes later, she got up abruptly, came around to my side of the bed, grabbed the condom off the floor, and ran into the bathroom. I was confused and a little concerned but brushed it off. While lying there, I heard a loud crash in my bathroom and she yelled an expletive. I asked if she was okay and got no response, and I started worrying that she had fallen and hurt herself. I went to open the door and she was standing in my shower with one leg propped up, trying to shove the condom into her vagina after flipping it inside out. I completely panicked and had no idea what to do. She was clearly panicked and probably embarrassed, and I shut the door. She immediately came back out, said she was going to leave. I said that was fine, and I never heard from her again. Story 3. We lived about 25 minutes from each other, so we agreed to meet at the beach pier about halfway between us. Before meeting, we had been texting, and he seemed totally normal. I was already at the pier when he texted me saying he could not meet me there because his license was revoked, and it was too far for him to walk. I should have just left then, but I agreed to meet him at a pizza place closer to him. I got there and was standing outside when I saw him and quickly realized the pictures from his profile were at least 3 to 5 years old. He looked like the discount store version of himself. Greasy, like he had not showered in days. Hair unkempt, holes in his shirt. I awkwardly gave him a side hug and suggested we get a seat, and he said that we were not getting pizza and that we should go to the park instead. I awkwardly agreed, and as he talked, I realized his gums and tongue ring were stained black from smoking. By that point, I was completely turned off and just keeping up formalities. We got to the park and found a bench to talk, and before I could sit down, he pulled me onto his lap, squeezing me and saying that I was extremely cute. I awkwardly scooted away and tried to start a conversation. He pulled out his phone and started texting for a few minutes, not really listening to me, before interrupting to ask if I smoked and suggesting we go back to his place because his friend supplied it. I declined. He tried again, saying his place was right there and we could have some fun too, and I declined again. Then he pulled me close by the face and whispered that I was innocent before licking my face from chin to ear with his tongue. Completely stunned, I sat there for a moment processing what had just happened as he kept talking about smoking before I decided to fake an urgent phone call and leave. Story 4. A girl said she was having a work party at her house and that I should come over. It was bring your own beverages, so I bought a six-pack for myself. I went to her place and noticed that more than half of the people there were younger, around 17 to 18 years old, while I was 21 and the girl was also 21. Then they gathered everyone in the living room and proceeded to talk about the job. It turned out it was one of those pyramid scheme recruiting gatherings. I just sat there drinking my beer, being the only one drinking, for about 2 hours because I felt it was rude to leave since they were telling sob stories and talking about how much this job had helped them. I sat there listening to some head of the group guy explaining how we could make millions in a short amount of time and saying things like, "You see my BMW 3 Series out front? That is a company car you can drive if you do what we do." It was sad because they were clearly trapping low-income teenagers who were deciding not to go to college and instead join them. After the pitch, I had pretty much had enough and was preparing to leave. Then the girl came up to me and asked what I thought, and I just said it was not for me and that I was leaving. She asked if I wanted to take my beer with me, and I said they needed it more than I did. 2 or 3 weeks later, she sent me a text. Unfortunately, we had exchanged numbers, asking if the head of the group guy could call me to ask questions about why I was not signing up and what I thought about the group session. I did not reply, but sure enough, the guy called me and I politely said it was not for me, but he kept pushing until I finally had to tell him to leave me alone. That was the end of that, and I never went to work parties for a Tinder date again. It was a complete mess, and if it had not been for the beer I brought or the Tinder date's dog, I would have left much sooner. Looking back, during the pitch, the head of the group guy said at one point that if you were not interested in making $1 million, you could just leave and no one was stopping you. And I really wish I had stood up, finished my beer, said that this was ridiculous, and walked out. But that is just a daydream I have sometimes. Story 5, I went on a Tinder date several months ago around October, and it went really well. The girl had a job, was not unstable, and was cute, so we decided to have a second date. The only issue was that the second date was at her Thanksgiving party, so she could introduce me to her friends and family, which I thought was a bit too early. I did not have anything planned that day, so I decided to go anyway. My job was to make the jungle juice for the party, and it consisted of the usual Everclear, Hawaiian Punch, lemonade powder, and ice combination I had used throughout college. It worked very well, and everyone got extremely drunk. Near the end of the party, my date and her friends told me I had done an amazing job with the drink. My date also mentioned that she really liked the fruit I had added and that everyone at the party was trying to get some. For some reason, that comment did not sit well with drunk me, so I headed over to the alcohol container to investigate. I grabbed a ladle and started scraping the bottom of the container, and on one scoop I found chunks of food and pieces of noodles. That was when I realized that someone had thrown up in the jungle juice. Story 6. I matched with a girl and we sent a lot of messages, and later that night we talked on the phone. The conversation was going really well, so I asked her out for the next night and she agreed. About 5 minutes later, she told me she needed to tell me something important and then explained that she was permanently in a wheelchair. I realized I would either look bad if I backed out or look bad if I led her on, so I figured why not? It was just a date and it could still be fun. We talked more that night and went to bed, and the next morning she called me early and told me she was doing something crazy. She would not tell me what it was, but said she would show me later. A few hours went by and she called again and told me she was going to send me a picture of what she did. I checked my messages and saw a picture of her wrist with my name tattooed on it. We ended the call, and I immediately told my friends about the situation. Later that night, I drove to her place because I figured if she was committed enough to tattoo my name on her wrist, I should be committed enough to go on the date, and I also needed to know if it was real. When I was almost there, I realized my car might not accommodate her wheelchair, and since I knew she drove, I asked if she could drive us. I was walking through the parking lot when she pulled up, and I got into the car. I had assumed she had a wheelchair-accessible vehicle, but she did not, and instead used 2 crutches to drive, one for the gas and one for the brake. This made me very uncomfortable as we were driving on the Southern California freeways in traffic. We went out to eat and she received a phone call from her daughter, and I found out she had left her 10-year-old daughter at home alone and that the child was scared. I suggested we leave, but she said it was fine because she had given her something to help her sleep and that she would be asleep soon. We finished eating, and I was planning to take her to see a movie, but the situation with the child was too much, so we headed back. And as we were driving, she casually mentioned that she was kind of drunk. I knew she had only had one drink, but I asked if I could drive and she refused, saying she would just get into the fast lane and press the gas with her crutch. Somehow we made it back to her place safely. I wheeled her to her door, said goodbye, and went home. And the tattoo turned out to be real. Story 7. I have one where I was probably the nightmare. I went on a first date with a girl from Tinder at a Cajun restaurant in Dallas. The restaurant was Razoo's on 75. I had recently read about something called kratom that was supposed to make you feel really relaxed and euphoric, and I had tried making a tea from the recommended dose the previous day, but I did not feel anything from it. I figured if this stuff was supposed to make you feel calm and euphoric, then the best time to take it would be before a first date, and since I did not feel anything the first time, I assumed I should take more. I wrapped a lot of it, since kratom is usually sold as a greenish, extremely bitter powder, into balls of deli meat and swallowed them whole before the date. I went to lunch feeling completely fine until I met the girl and sat down. And then I suddenly realized I was only seconds away from violently throwing up all of that kratom and deli meat in the middle of the restaurant. I excused myself, stood up from the table, and walked a few steps toward the bathroom before I started vomiting uncontrollably. I covered my mouth with my hands, started choking on my own vomit, and sprinted toward the bathroom, leaving a trail of vomit across the floor before continuing to vomit into the trash can inside. I spent some time cleaning my face and washing my arms and hands, which were covered in vomit, and then returned to the table and tried to survive the rest of the lunch date without dying of embarrassment. I felt like a complete jerk and was unbelievably embarrassed. Story 8. After a movie date with a guy I met on Tinder, we went back to my place. I will call him Dude. I told him we could hang out for a bit, but I had work in the morning and would need to go to sleep soon. Dude said that was fine, but mentioned he was hungry and wanted to order food, which I agreed to. He ordered 2 large subs from Potbelly along with a milkshake and finished all of it. I did not judge since he was 6 feet 4 inches tall, about 210 pounds and still young, so I did not think much of it at the time. We ended up fooling around a bit and fell asleep in bed. I woke up to my front door opening and closing several times over about 5 minutes. My dogs were going crazy, and it was 1 in the morning. I opened my bedroom door, which leads into the rest of my apartment, and saw the bathroom light on with the door wide open. I walked around the corner and made eye contact with Dude, who was squatting over my toilet holding a stick and poking around in murky brown water that was millimeters from overflowing onto my bathroom floor. Completely horrified, he yelled at me to stop looking at him, go back to bed, and said he had it under control. I was still half asleep, trying to understand what I was seeing, and I started nervous laughing because I did not know what else to do. He yelled asking why I did not have a plunger, and I said I had never needed one before. He told me again to go back to bed, and since I was disturbed, exhausted, unable to process what was happening, and had work in the morning, I did. A bit later, I heard him peek into my room and say that he fixed it, and then I heard him leave and the door close behind him. The next morning, I cautiously checked the toilet and saw the water level was down, but something was still sticking up from the bottom. After closer inspection, I realized it was the end of a stick. Using gloves, towels, and barbecue tongs, I pulled out roughly 3 feet of broken stick from my toilet, along with several other fragments. I finally understood why I had heard the door opening and closing so many times, because he had been going outside to find sticks that kept breaking. He had left dirty water stains all over my bathroom floor and left my apartment so fast that he forgot his underwear, undershirt, and socks. After work that day, I went straight to the store and bought a plunger. Story 9. I have a couple, not from Tinder, but from meeting guys on Match back when I was single and ready to mingle. The first one seemed quite nice at first, but was a bit controlling on the first date, deciding where we went without asking my opinion. But I figured some people like that level of assertiveness, so maybe he just read me wrong. I agreed to go on a second date, and he would not tell me where we were going other than saying London. I told him I needed to know so I knew what to wear, but really it was for personal safety reasons. He told me to wear a dress, which I never do, and when I said I was not wearing a dress, he got irritated with me. When I pushed and said I needed to know exactly where I was going with someone I had just met, he told me I was being difficult and completely out of line. He lost his temper and became verbally abusive, calling me insulting names, so I blocked him. The second one was just plain rude and made several strange remarks throughout the evening. I joked about having a larger backside, which I had been honest about in my profile, and he responded in a flat tone that, yes, he noticed. He chewed gum throughout the date, and when we ate, he stuck it to the side plate and left it there for the waitress to clear. We then ran into a very cheerful colleague of mine, whom I introduced, and who loudly declared that I was the best boss ever, which I am really not, and the guy simply shrugged and turned his back on him. I ended the date early, and as I turned to leave, he tried to shoulder bump me aggressively and missed. I blocked him immediately and reported him to Match. Story 10, I matched with a cute girl a few years back, and we went out for drinks. It was going well, so we decided to head to the beach with a six-pack to stargaze and make out. Somehow we ended up on a stolen sailboat at 2 in the morning with her ex, an older drunken boat repairman who had copied the keys to steal the boat, and her dog. After arguing with her ex for about 30 minutes, she blacked out and fell asleep. Her dog was terrified and made a mess everywhere. Her ex started tripping on acid and yelled at me that I had to take care of her and never hurt her, then ran to the front of the boat to continue his experience. The old drunken boat thief was just relaxing and drinking vodka like it was water. I decided to clean up after the dog, brought the poor animal into the cabin with me, and eventually passed out. The next morning, I woke up to the girl and her ex screaming at each other about a car crash and who was at fault. The old boat thief was gone, and I had no idea where I had parked. I left without them noticing, got some coffee and breakfast, wandered around the harbor until I found my car, and never spoke to her again, although I did not delete the app. Story 11. I went on a date with an Australian woman who had just moved here 2 weeks earlier and knew no one. The first date was at a pub and was completely fine. She was a bit overwhelming, talking non-stop, but we got along. For the second date, she chose a very cheap pub because she had just gotten a job and had not been paid yet. She then wanted to see live music, so I took her to a really nice live music pub about 30 minutes away. The band was good, but she talked to and annoyed almost everyone there, to the point that one of the band members' partners asked me if I was noticing the warning signs yet. I tried to guide us back toward where we both lived, since we lived fairly close to each other, but on the way she suggested going to a large Australian and New Zealand hangout bar because she wanted another drink. When we arrived, it was closed, but a few people invited us to join them for drinks. I managed to discourage that idea because she urgently needed to use the bathroom, so I took her around the corner and stood in front of her to give her some privacy. While she was relieving herself, I heard something hit the ground, and she casually asked if that had just happened, saying she did not think so. When I turned around, I saw a large mess on the ground behind her, an unnatural color that definitely should not have come from a person. She asked what she should do, and then remembered she had plastic wrap from a compact dish she had just bought from the band and used that to clean herself, which only made things worse. I immediately offered to call her a cab, but she declined and suggested we go find the people from earlier to keep drinking. I firmly said no. She kissed me and walked away. What still amazes me is that she could very easily have gone back to those two guys, and if she did, they would have been in for a very unpleasant surprise. Story 12. I met a girl I was convinced I could marry. We went for a walk on a nearby trail, had a great time talking, and planned to go to the beach. But it started raining, and my mother lived close by. She said it would be nice to meet her, and despite me offering other options, she insisted. And surprisingly, it was not awkward at all, and my mother really liked her. We all had dinner together and had a great time. She said she needed to use the bathroom and my mother needed something from upstairs. And as she came out, I was on the landing heading back down when she grabbed my hand and kissed me. The next time we met, we slept together at my place. I had to go away for work for about a month, and she said she was completely okay with it, understood it was my job, and that I loved traveling. When I got back, everything was great, and after another month, we went on holiday together. The trip was perfect, and I was completely in love with her, and we both had an amazing time. The train from the airport passed through her town first, so we hugged, kissed, said goodbye, and that was the last time I ever saw her. I do not understand what happened because everything felt perfect. I texted her and she said she needed space, which I respected. I had to go away again, and when I got back I asked if she wanted to get lunch or meet up, and she told me she was over it and had moved on. We had been dating for a total of about 6 months, and I still do not understand what I did wrong, and I still think about her every day, which feels awful. Story 13. I worked at a sushi restaurant all through college, and one night during a busy dinner rush, this attractive guy and his friend came in. I was running around nonstop but still managed to give them good service, and they both tipped extremely well. After my shift, I was at home drinking a beer and mindlessly swiping on Tinder, trying to unwind, when the same guy from work popped up on my screen. He had a very distinctive face and tattoos and, honestly, a memorable tip, so I swiped right and promptly passed out. The next day I woke up to see we had matched and he had sent some very sweet messages. We started texting, and I found out he was only in town for business. He asked me out to dinner at a very expensive restaurant, which made me nervous. But after a mix of mimosas and questionable advice from my roommates, I agreed to meet him that night. He was oddly insistent on picking me up, and I finally told him I would cancel if I could not drive myself. So he backed down and we met at an upscale French restaurant. He ordered an extremely expensive bottle of wine, lobster, and everything else, spending an absurd amount of money, and with the tip, I am sure the bill was around $600. The conversation started normally, but as he drank more, he casually revealed that he was married, though supposedly in an open relationship. I did not believe him, so he called his wife right there and sent her pictures of me, and I heard her tell him to invite me to their home in Cancun. At that point, every alarm in my head was going off. When he got off the phone, I asked how he afforded such a lifestyle, and without any change in expression, he calmly said it was through involvement with a substance cartel, assuring me it was safe. I immediately tried to leave. He followed me to my car, tried to pressure me into the situation he had described, showed me pictures of his wife and his social media as proof, and then said I owed him at least a visit to his hotel room because he had spent so much on dinner. He even tried to force a kiss. I managed to get away, but I was terrified he might follow me home, so I drove around for a while and then spent the night at a friend's place where there were other people around. I deleted Tinder that day with no regrets, and looking back, I still wonder if it could have been part of something far more dangerous. Story 14. This happened on Bumble, and even though I have many bad dating stories, this one was the worst. At the time, I was single and had a lot of guys on my Snapchat from Bumble because I was not looking for anything serious. One day, a guy messaged me asking if I wanted to hang out, and I politely declined because I was already out with someone else. He went on a long rant about how women play games and do not want real relationships, so I ignored him and went on with my day. The next day, I completely forgot about the interaction and posted on my story asking if anyone wanted to go to the park and relax. The same guy replied, and not recognizing him at first, I agreed to meet him. The date actually went well, and as it got late, I told him I had to leave to work on a school project. He insisted we go to dinner, and after repeatedly declining, I finally gave in while we were walking to our cars. He followed me to campus and said he would wait until I was done, and when I finished around 8 in the evening, we went to a restaurant. During dinner, he told me about his divorce, how his ex-wife had taken everything, his military service, being injured overseas, and months of rehabilitation. He had a handicap license plate, so I did not question it, even though he walked perfectly fine. It was clear he carried a lot of anger, especially toward his ex-wife. The date took a strange turn when another man I had briefly dated weeks earlier showed up intoxicated and caused a scene, apologizing to me loudly. Because of the disruption, we left and sat in my date's car to talk. I was young and missed all the warning signs, and we ended up dating. About 6 months later, my grandfather passed away, and I traveled from North Carolina to California for the funeral. On the day of the funeral, I checked social media and realized he had blocked me everywhere. Through a friend, I discovered pictures of him with another woman, so the relationship ended due to his infidelity. When I returned home, I was contacted by the police. I found out he was a registered offender who had committed a serious crime involving a minor, and they wanted to question me because he was under investigation for additional illegal activities. Story 15. A few years ago, I went on a date with a somewhat older man. He was 45 and I was 25. We met for coffee and talked for a couple of hours, and it went really well with easy conversation. He invited me back to his place to use his high-end vaporizer and said we could fool around if the mood felt right. I was interested, partly because that kind of setup is rare and fun, and he was attractive and easygoing. We spent time together and relaxed, and another hour or two later, we were sitting on his couch finishing a conversation when there was a knock at his door. He looked confused, clearly not expecting anyone, and went to answer it while I could see from the living room. It was a cute guy who looked to be around my age, and they had a brief, quiet exchange before the guy left. When he came back, I raised an eyebrow, and he casually explained that it was his son's best friend, someone he had been seeing on and off since the friend was 21. Since I was not looking for anything serious and he knew that, he told me about how over the years many nice guys had come to him for conversation, understanding, and intimacy in a very open-minded environment. He explained that sometimes he made the first move, like when he messaged me on Tinder, but often others pursued him and kept coming back. I understood why, because he was intelligent, calm, well-traveled, generous, easy to talk to, and very attractive. He had been married before, was now single, financially comfortable, lived in a nice neighborhood, and had built a successful small business that supported a good life. He genuinely seemed like a good person. He told me stories about listening to people who were struggling with coming out or dealing with abusive families, offering support, a place to stay, or help finding work. I saw him a few more times before eventually moving out of state. About a year and a half later, I came back to visit and reached out to see how he was doing, and we met for coffee. Almost immediately, I noticed he looked much more worn down and older than before. He told me he had acute leukemia and did not have much time left. But he spoke calmly and said he accepted it and felt he had lived a full life, with a great son, strong friendships, and good support around him. Even though he looked physically exhausted, hearing him talk like that showed the strength of character I had seen before. We hugged and shared some heartfelt words. He was a truly kind and generous soul, and the last I heard, he passed away surrounded by friends and family, and I will always remember him. Story 16, I went on a date with a woman and we met for dinner. She seemed a bit distant, spoke very quietly, was attractive but oddly disconnected, and while we had a decent conversation, I could barely hear her. At the end of the date, instead of a normal goodbye, she walked away and then came back as if she remembered that people usually acknowledge each other before leaving, which felt strange and probably should have been the end of it. I went out with her again and we saw the movie Annihilation about scientists exploring an alien landing site, and partway through she became very distressed and covered her eyes even though the movie was not especially frightening. Afterwards, we went to the theater bar so she could calm down, and while talking she showed me a reservation she had made for the weekend under a completely different name than the one on her dating profile, which she had never explained. And that should have been another stopping point. I still went out with her again and planned to pick her up for Thai food. She told me to come in because she was finishing her coffee and she lived on an odd walking-only street. When I arrived, her apartment looked nice and empty in front, and when she opened the door, her very large dog walked over calmly. She snapped her fingers and stared at the dog, instantly controlling it, which felt more intense than normal training. Inside, her place was nicely furnished, and she mentioned she was a psychiatrist who did in-home consultations, with medication bottles visible on the table. She took an extremely long time sipping coffee while I was eager to leave for food. Her roommate came downstairs, a large gamer type who shared my first name, went to the kitchen, returned with a rolled-up black case, and began sharpening knives while staring at me. The kitchen already had a full knife set, and the situation made me extremely uncomfortable, especially since she acted completely unfazed. Eventually, we did go to dinner, where she explained that her roommate was a recovering addict she had allowed to stay with her, and that many of her behaviors were related to synesthesia and attention issues, which explained her reaction to the movie. Things calmed down somewhat, but I could not shake how unsettling the earlier situation felt. I still went out with her one last time, and during that date she began analyzing me professionally, asking deep personal questions, and quickly breaking down emotional defenses I had built. It left me shaken while she remained completely composed. Back at her place, nothing physical happened, but I felt emotionally exposed and unsettled, especially when I noticed two knives laid out neatly on a chair in the living room. At that point, I left immediately, walking away through the strange, empty frontage and thinking how isolated the area was. Later, a friend suggested that she was probably just unusual and that her roommate may have been intentionally trying to scare me off to protect his living situation, which made sense. But the entire experience was deeply unsettling and remains one of the strangest dates I have ever had. Story 17. We matched, he said I was cute, and asked how small I was. I told him my height and weight, and he replied with something along the lines of saying it was very attractive. He then asked who I lived with, and I told him I lived alone. He said he had roommates and immediately said he wanted to come over to my apartment. I told him clearly that I would only meet him in a public place first, and that if that went well, I might invite him over later. But because of my size and the fact that the city can be dangerous, I never invited someone I had not met to my home. I thought he seemed okay otherwise, and we exchanged flirty messages for about a week before a plan was suggested to meet at a coffee shop at noon on a Friday. He asked me to name the place, which I did, but then said he could not get there during his lunch break. I explained that since he was the one with time and location restrictions, he should pick the cafe instead. He again said he wanted to meet at my apartment. I told him no and asked him to choose a public place, and he joked about meeting at my place for the third time. I finally named another coffee shop and said I would meet him there at noon if he confirmed. This was around 10 in the morning. By 11, I had not heard back and realized I did not want to meet him at all. I reminded myself that because I am openly trans on my dating profile, some people may target me for harm, and the first thing this man had done was confirm he was physically larger than me, then repeatedly try to meet me at my home where I live alone, even after I was very clear about my boundaries. He could have been clueless, but he also could have been dangerous. I went home and picked up a work gig, and when I was briefly out of cell service, I came back to a flood of messages from him saying the app would not let him message me earlier and that he still wanted to meet at my apartment. After all of that, he still refused to meet in public. That was enough for me, so I told him I was no longer interested and deleted the app. Story 18. I have a lot of dating stories, like the one where a girl showed me pepper spray and a knife before coming into my apartment, or the one where another girl repeated everything I said back to me, or the one where someone interrogated me so intensely on the first date that I had to tell her to dial it down, or I was leaving. But the most memorable one was with a woman I will call Gina. Gina was one of those Instagram personalities who constantly posted photos of herself in revealing outfits, always posing for the camera. And when she asked to meet up, I agreed. I drove all the way to Koreatown in Los Angeles, which I normally would not do for a first date, but I felt adventurous and definitely got an experience. I picked a bar I liked and asked her to meet me there. She walked in wearing a very flashy outfit and heels, looked confident, but her face looked noticeably older than in her photos. She immediately complained about the place and said we should leave. I had just ordered my drink, so I finished it quickly and followed her to another trendy bar. We got drinks, sat down, and less than 10 minutes into talking, she suggested we leave because it was too loud and go back to her place. Against my better judgment, I went along with it. Her apartment looked fairly normal, though there was an open bottle of alcohol on her makeup desk. We smoked a little, and she jumped onto her bed to listen to music. So about 20 minutes into a first date, we were already sitting on her bed. When I made a mild move, she suddenly said it was moving too fast, so I backed off completely. She then became irritated that I stopped engaging and got up to change clothes, slowly undressing in front of me and clearly trying to get a reaction. At that point, I realized she enjoyed pushing people away and then provoking them to chase her, which is not something I have patience for. When I did not react, she became angry and started an argument out of nowhere. That was when I decided it was not worth the effort. I told her I was leaving, put my shoes on, and walked out despite her trying to stop me. I went and got tacos instead, which was easily the best decision of the night. Story 19. I went on a dinner date with a guy and it went really well. He seemed interesting, the conversation flowed, and we did not hook up right away, which made me think he might be looking for something more than just S, and that felt nice. I thought he was attractive and was excited to see where things might go. We made plans for a second date and decided to go on a hike. I said I did not mind driving, so I picked him up the morning of the hike. Right away, he felt different from the first date. I was trying hard to keep the conversation going, but he barely talked and spent almost the entire car ride looking at his phone. It annoyed me, but I tried to ignore it and make the best of the day. When we reached the waterfall, things got a little physical and we started kissing, and it was clear we both wanted to hook up, so we decided to go back to his place. When we got to his room, I immediately noticed around 10 to 15 open condom wrappers on his bedside table, and when I used the bathroom, there were even more in the trash. I honestly do not know why I still went through with it, other than feeling lonely and making excuses in my head. The S was not even good, and afterward he immediately went back to scrolling on his phone until I made an excuse to leave. I knew right away I did not want to see him again, and since I do not like ghosting, I messaged him and explained that I was not in a good headspace to be dating, apologized, and said I would be open to being friends if he wanted, but I understood if not. He left me on red, and I assumed that was the end. About 1 month later, he replied, saying I had hurt him, that he felt taken advantage of, and sent a long message clearly trying to make me feel guilty. At that point, I was done being polite, so I told him directly how rude it was to be glued to his phone on a date and how gross it was to leave used condom wrappers everywhere, along with a few other honest points. He left me on red again, and I never heard from him after that. Story 20. I went on a date with a girl, and when I arrived to pick her up, the very first thing that happened was her opening the door and telling me she needed to take care of something, then asking if I could take her dog outside so it could go to the bathroom. I like dogs, so I agreed, grabbed the dog, and took it out to the grass in front of her apartment. She came up behind me, jumped on my back in a playful way, thanked me, and gave me a quick kiss on the cheek, even though we had met maybe 5 minutes earlier, and I had already spent more time with her dog than with her. We put the dog back inside and went out to get ice cream, talking along the way, and everything seemed fine until she got a phone call that she said she had to take because it was her landlord. I noticed her mood immediately change, and after she hung up, I asked what was wrong. She then unloaded her entire situation on me, explaining that she had separated from her husband not long ago and that the divorce had finalized just the week before, only a day or so before we matched. She continued sharing her life story in great detail, like I was her therapist, and eventually explained that she needed to move to another apartment across the parking lot. She gave me a look that clearly suggested she expected me to offer to help her move, but since I had just met her and already listened to a lot, I chose not to engage and ignored the hint. Not long after that, the date ended and I dropped her off at her place. Later that night, she messaged me thanking me for the date and then added that she really needed someone to help her move. I replied that I would see what I could do, and then I never spoke to her again. Story 21. A little late to this, but here is my story. This girl and I started talking, and the conversation was smooth and fun, and from her pictures, she looked really cute. She was studying psychology at a university close to my house, so we made a plan to hang out the second day and watch a movie at my place. When the time came, she got dropped off by her friend, and I had to go find her because she could not locate my house. I walked up to the car and saw the girl smiling, while her friend had a look of pure terror on her face like absolute fear. I was 19 at the time, a fairly normal athletic guy, tall enough, clean, and well-groomed, so having someone look at me like that was extremely confusing. The girl got out of the car and it was definitely the same person from the photos, except she had completely shaved her head. As we walked toward my place, she was very quiet, but every few seconds she would randomly say a word like beef, taco, socks, or meow, sometimes right in the middle of what I thought was a conversation. I figured maybe she was just extremely quirky. I asked about her hair, and she said she just felt like cutting it. No illness, no donation, nothing like that. I asked what she liked to do, and she replied that she was seriously weird, said meow, told me she liked when people called her squiggly, that all her friends called her squiggly, and then said taco again. At that point, I was wondering who I had just brought into my house. We sat on the couch to watch a movie, sitting several feet apart, and she suddenly went from energetic to having a terrified look in her eyes. I tried making small talk while picking a movie, and asked if she was okay. She said she was going to have a seizure and that she was going to go to the taco hospital, then started laughing. I asked if she wanted me to drive her somewhere, and she said no, that her friend would pick her up. I walked her out to be polite. She said bye, meow, and I went back inside, brought my dogs in, and opened my phone to block her number, only to see that she had already blocked me. The entire situation lasted about 15 minutes. To this day, I have no idea what really happened or what was going on, but I hope she's okay. I later called two of my female friends to ask if they could help me understand it, and they found her Instagram with 10 followers and a bio that said all my friends call me Squiggly. Story 22. I met a girl, let us call her Sonia. We got dinner at a restaurant near her place, and then went back to her house to drink and hang out. During the night, she casually mentioned that she had a guy who stalked her, and I was not sure what to make of it and did not think much more about it at the time. I ended up drinking too much to drive home, so I slept on her couch and we planned to get breakfast in the morning before I went to work. Around 6 in the morning, we got ready to leave, and she mentioned that her stalker had texted her saying he would be there in 5 minutes, so it was good we were leaving. That sounded strange to me because I had never heard of a stalker announcing himself like that, especially so early. But I was tired and hungover, so we left. Her house was near campus, and my car was parallel parked on a one-way street. As I was pulling out, a minivan pulled up next to me and trapped my car. The driver rolled down his window and yelled that he said he loved her, and I immediately realized this was real. After a brief exchange that I barely remember, he pulled forward and drove off. Sonia apologized repeatedly, saying she used to date him, that it was not serious, and that she was embarrassed, so I tried to give her the benefit of the doubt. I needed to turn the same direction he went, but instead I turned the opposite way to get out of there. I checked my mirror and saw him make a turn and start following us. I pulled into a grocery store parking lot to confirm it, drove through it, and he followed me exactly. At a red light, he pulled up next to my car on the passenger side and yelled at her to roll her window down, which she refused to do. I made an aggressive, illegal turn to escape, and he did the same thing and kept following us. He then started revving his engine, accelerating toward my car, and slamming on his brakes at the last second, repeatedly, as we drove through side streets toward downtown Columbus. I asked Sonia if he could be dangerous or have a weapon, and she said she was not sure. She called the police, who told us to keep driving toward the police station since it was close. We drove there, and when we pulled in, he drove past us. After waiting a few minutes, we decided to go to breakfast anyway. She paid, but I could barely eat because my heart was still racing. She still needed a ride home afterward, and even though I was nervous about going near her place again, I dropped her off since police were heading there as well. I went straight to work afterward, wide awake, and nothing ever worked out between me and Sonia after that. Story 23, I tried Match when I first moved to a medium-sized tourist town during the off-season and did not know a single person. There were very few options, but I ended up meeting one guy. We went on one date to a casual barbecue place, and he went completely overboard with gentlemanly gestures. I appreciate someone opening a door once in a while, but having to literally wait for someone else to open every single door for me, including getting out of the car, was excessive and irritating. He pulled out my chair, insisted on carrying my food, and was so aggressively chivalrous that it became awkward. During the conversation, he mentioned that he hated women on Match who were not looking for serious relationships, and that it was a major issue for him. He was pleasant enough, and I was lonely, so we went back to my place and started kissing. Things escalated, and suddenly he said the condom had come off and that it was fine because he trusted me, and he tried to continue without protection. I had to stop him immediately because continuing without a condom on a first date was a huge red flag and a complete turnoff. At least he respected that boundary, and we ended the night. We saw each other briefly the next day, but I felt no real connection. He did not appreciate my sarcastic sense of humor, and we had little in common. We continued chatting online, and by the third day after our date, less than a week after matching, he was already asking when he could meet my friends and family. I decided to be honest and told him we seemed to want different things and that I did not want to waste his time. He instantly flipped personalities, going from over-the-top, chivalrous to bitter and hostile. He insulted me, called me names, and accused me of using him, which was absurd considering the date cost him a $9 plate of barbecue and a sweet tea. I blocked him and moved on, feeling lucky that I walked away with free food, no pregnancy, and no controlling relationship. Story 24. A Bumble date started out well, and we ended up going back to her place, where she told me I did not need to use a condom. Against my better judgment and ignoring the warnings in my head, I agreed. Almost immediately things felt off, because she was extremely exaggerated in her behavior, like she was trying to imitate something out of a movie. Everything was over the top, from the sounds she made to the way she moved, to the point where it was uncomfortable rather than enjoyable. She kept telling me to go harder, so I did, until I realized I was completely overdoing it and running out of energy. I assumed she was inexperienced and thought those exaggerated behaviors were normal, so I decided to just get it over with. When I said I was close, she told me to finish inside her. I hesitated and she became more forceful, telling me to do it and tightening her legs around me. I tried to pull away, but it was too late. Afterward, I was angry and confused, and the situation turned into an argument. I insisted that we go to a pharmacy to get emergency contraception, and she argued that it was her body and her choice, saying hookups were cheaper than using a donor. She admitted that whenever she told people this beforehand, they would leave before sleeping with her, and then she started crying and talking about how she was almost 30 and wanted a child before that age. I had known her for only a few hours. After hours of arguing, she finally agreed to go with me to get the medication. That experience completely turned me off dating apps. Story 25. The first guy I met on Tinder wanted to grab a drink at a bar in Los Angeles. I parked my car, and while I was walking toward the bar, I got a call from him. He told me that 1 minute had passed since the time we were supposed to meet and that I was late, so he left. I was shocked and immediately turned around, irritated, when he said he was just kidding and that he could see me. I turned back around and saw the bar about 20 feet ahead of me, with him standing outside waving. He was wearing a tie-dye tank top, red basketball shorts, a Bubba Gump trucker hat, and bright red and blue Jordans. I wanted to turn around and go home right then, but he had already seen me. He commented that I was too dressed up and asked if his outfit was appropriate for our date, and I honestly did not even know what to say, especially since we were at a nice wine bar in Beverly Hills. We sat down and he asked what I wanted to drink, and I said anything but rosé. When the waitress came, he ordered me a rosé anyway. I assumed he misheard me and let it go. He then told me he was a criminal defense attorney. About 15 minutes later, he asked if it was okay if his friend stopped by briefly, and I said I did not mind since I was planning on leaving soon. He got the check and suggested we head next door to Wolfgang Puck, because his friend would be there. Once we arrived, he told me the friend was actually one of his clients. I asked if the client was guilty, and he casually said yes. A few minutes later, the friend arrived with a woman. After introductions, the two men went outside to smoke. The woman and I started talking, and she asked me if it was possible to get an infection because she had just had sex with that guy in a car before they came inside. And afterward, he told her he had herpes. She said they did not use protection and wondered if being on birth control would prevent it. I told her it would not and that it only prevented pregnancy. When the men returned, they began loudly harassing a couple sitting nearby, making crude comments about an older man and a younger woman. I was mortified and told them to stop. The friend escalated and tried to confront the couple directly until the bartender intervened and told him to knock it off. I stood up and left immediately. As I walked out, the guy I was on a date with muttered that he knew I would just leave. I did not look back. By the time I reached my car, I deleted my account, realizing the entire disaster had happened in less than an hour. Story 26. I had been talking to this guy for a while, and we really hit it off. After a couple of weeks, he admitted that the pictures on his profile were actually of his brother. He explained that he had self-esteem issues because he had a fairly new and noticeable scar on his face from a car accident, though it honestly was not bad at all. He sent me real photos of himself, including pictures with his brother, to prove he was being honest. His brother was attractive, but I thought he was cute too, scar included. He apologized for lying and said he hoped I would still meet him, but that he would understand if it was too much. I appreciated the honesty and felt empathy, so I agreed to meet him. When we did, he immediately acted completely different from how he had been over messages. He was distant, rude, and difficult to talk to, like he was annoyed the entire time. I finally asked what was wrong, and he told me I did not look like my pictures and claimed I was heavier than before. I was stunned, especially because I had not gained any weight. I told him I did not think that was true and pointed out how hypocritical it was, considering he had used his brother's photos. He argued that he had come clean before the date and then started listing supposed flaws in detail, saying my face looked rounder, my collarbones were not as visible, and my body looked bigger in certain places. In the middle of this, I grabbed my things and told him it was not the scar that made him unattractive, but his personality. As I walked out, he started yelling insults at me, and I left him with the bill before the food even arrived. The experience stayed with me for a long time, especially because I have struggled with body image issues, and it genuinely hurt. Story 27. Nobody will probably see this since it was so far down the chain, but I needed to get it off my chest. I went to her place to hang out, an old three-flat in Chicago, and immediately realized she had a big group of friends over, including the stereotypical group mix, which felt strange for what was supposed to be a one-on-one hangout. She had multiple roommates who stayed in their rooms, but the apartment itself smelled strongly of cat litter and was dirty overall. I showed up with a 30-pack of beer, not realizing it was apparently meant for everyone. And I had also brought some liquor, so whatever. She said she was planning to cook for us but had not even started by the time I arrived. I quickly assessed the situation and figured she looked like her pictures and was attractive, but I was absolutely not staying all night waiting for food or spending the night there. She insisted on cooking chicken wings, pulled frozen chicken straight from the freezer, and started trying to thaw it. A long time passed and it was nowhere near ready, and when I hinted at leaving, she started panicking, saying she wanted me to stay and finish cooking. After some back and forth, she threw the still frozen chicken into a pan, which only made me more determined to leave. At some point, she suggested at least showing me her room, and we ended up in there. The mattress was on the floor next to dirty litter boxes, which explained part of the smell, but I pushed past it. She stopped things at one point to explain she was on her period and suggested something else instead, and a few hours later I left. When I checked my phone afterward, I saw a text and missed call from my sister earlier that night. Horrified, I called her back and found out I had accidentally answered the phone during the situation, and she, along with her husband and friends, heard everything and laughed about it. Needless to say, I avoided eye contact with her for a very long time after that night. Story 28. In college, I went on a Tinder date with an older guy, and it was strictly meant to be a hookup. We did not go out beforehand and just met briefly before heading back to his place. He lived in a very upscale condo downtown that felt sterile and intense, and while he was a bit unsettling, I brushed it off at the time. Afterward, around 3 or 4 in the morning, he said it was too late for me to go back to campus and offered the guest room. When I woke up a couple of hours later, I realized my clothes were gone and the door would not open. I did not even know interior doors could be locked from the outside, and I was genuinely terrified. After I knocked loudly several times, he unlocked it and apologized, saying he locked the door out of habit. He handed my clothes back, freshly washed and neatly folded, and I got dressed and left immediately. It was only after I returned to my dorm that I noticed he had written his name on the tags inside my clothes in very fine marker. I have never really known what to make of that experience, but it still stands out as one of the most unsettling dates I have ever had. Story 29. I have never been on a Tinder date myself, but I am a bartender and I have witnessed plenty of them. There was this one guy who constantly brought his Tinder dates into my bar. He was short, rude, extremely aggressive, and consistently disrespectful to the staff. He usually showed up with women who already seemed uncomfortable, and if things appeared to be going well, he would aggressively try to make out with them in dark corners of the bar, which was incredibly uncomfortable to watch. If he decided he was not interested or sensed the date was not going his way, he would sneak out and leave the woman stuck with his entire tab. There were also several times when he thought the date was going well, and the woman clearly was not interested, and he would become hostile and nasty toward her. It got so bad that we started quietly warning women about him. Eventually, one woman turned him down and managed to sneak out because his behavior was so awful, but he followed her out and chased her on the highway in a road rage situation. She called the bar in tears asking what to do, and I told her to come back immediately and that we would have the police waiting. She returned shaking and crying, and when he saw the police cars in our parking lot, he kept driving. A couple of weeks later, he tried to come back into the bar. I stepped out from behind the bar, told him he needed to leave, and warned his date that he was dangerous and that she should stay inside until he was gone. He completely lost his temper, and I had to physically remove him from the building, and his head hit the front door on the way out. We never let him back in after that. Story 30. All right, buckle up because this is unfortunately one of the most disturbing experiences I have ever had. I was 25 at the time and had just gone through a painful breakup with someone I had been with since I was 17. I matched with this stunning girl and we hit it off right away. She was funny, engaging, and genuinely cool. I asked her out, and since she was 21, she wanted to meet at a club. We had a great night talking, dancing, and kissing, and she mentioned she was going through a divorce, which should have been a warning sign given her age, but I ignored it. At one point, she said she wanted me to meet her brother, explaining that she always had her brother meet anyone she was interested in. I agreed since I am protective of my own sister and understood the idea. Her brother was also at the club, and when we went to meet him, I realized I already knew him because he and his girlfriend were regulars at the restaurant I manage. At first, everything seemed fine, but the moment she walked away, his attitude changed completely, and he became cold, short, and openly hostile toward me. Later in the night, we had both had too much to drink, and she suddenly broke down crying outside, completely losing control. When she finally calmed down, she told me she was struggling deeply with her divorce. We sat and talked about heartbreak and rebuilding our lives. And then she started crying again and confessed that after her divorce, she had moved in with her brother and that they had started sleeping together. She said it was only supposed to happen once, but it kept happening and she did not know how to stop. I was drunk and overwhelmed and said something dismissive about everyone having baggage. What makes it worse is that I still tried to take her home afterward, but she went home with her brother instead. The next morning, once I sobered up, the reality of what had happened fully hit me. That was my first attempt at dating after a 6-year relationship, and after that experience, I barely used dating apps again. Story 31. My friend went on one of the best worst Tinder dates I have ever heard about. The guy suggested they go out for dinner at a nice restaurant in town, so she got all dressed up, only for him to message her about 30 minutes before the date saying it would be much nicer to cook dinner instead. His new plan was for them to meet at the supermarket, buy everything together, and then cook a lovely dinner at her house. She absolutely should have backed out at that point, but for some reason she went along with it. While walking through the store, he went on and on about how he learned to cook the best lamb tagine in Morocco, filling his basket with organic, free-range everything, including around 15 different spices needed for an authentic flavor. When they got to the checkout and everything was being scanned, he casually asked her if she could cover the bill since he would be doing the cooking. Again, she could have bailed, but she paid for the entire pile of random spices and ingredients. They went back to her place and he started cooking, making a huge frantic mess for the first 30 minutes before proudly announcing that everything just needed to cook for another 2 to 3 hours. At that point, she was hungry, tired, and completely stuck in her own house with this guy for hours. He was a stereotypical Bristol hippie type, so he noticed a guitar in her living room and insisted on playing songs for her, which turned into what felt like an entire album of his own cheesy white guy reggae music, complete with a dodgy fake Jamaican accent, while the tagine bubbled away in the background. After 3 eternal hours, he finally stopped performing and served the magical tagine, which was absolutely awful, with tough meat, overpowering spices, and was a total letdown. He completely disagreed and kept insisting it was the best tagine she had ever eaten. After paying for dinner, having her house trashed, sitting through a private reggae concert, and eating the worst tagine of her life, he then told her he had missed the last bus and would need to stay the night. At that point, she put her foot down, paid for a taxi, and got him the hell out of her house.